Hello and welcome back to Reading the Decades with me, today with my September wrap-up. September certainly wasn't that much of a lucky month for me reading wise, because I had quite a few books that weren't that great. So let's get right into it. I started the month with Period Piece, A Cambridge Childhood by Gwen Weverett. This is a memoir by the granddaughter of Charles Darwin. While it was quite charming to read about the people in her life, it also got quite tedious sometimes, especially when it came to describing the view of every window in her house. Again, not much luck with A Matter of Interpretation by Elizabeth MacDonald. This historical novel is based on the real-life events of a monk in the 13th century who translated several writings, especially Aristotle, who was very controversial at that time. The book covered a lot of time and appeared to be more like of a history non-fiction book with novel elements, which made it sometimes really boring, a bit tedious and also a bit rushed, and it didn't really appear to be well planned out. The topic is really fascinating, and I think the author would have done better with a non-fiction book on the topic instead of this mashup of a novelization of a non-fiction book. I don't know, it wasn't really for me. Another book I really didn't get much from was A Mind for Numbers by Barbara Oakley. This book gives study tips and explains learning methods for especially when you want to learn sciencey topics and topics with lots of numbers. But obviously this book is directed at neurotypical people, so I didn't get anything out of it really, which was really sad because I was really excited for that one. Next I read Between the Acts, Virginia Woolf's last work, about a day in 1939 that blends prose, drama and poetry. I enjoyed it, and it is widely known as one of her best works, but I enjoyed it, but I don't think it's one of her best works. But it's still very interesting, and I'm going to take a course on this one, so I hope I get a lot more out of it than just me reading it on my own. Another very enjoyable read was The Fragments by Tony Jordan, which is a mystery about the fragments of an unpublished book and a dead author. The story has a dual timeline. One timeline is set in 30s and ongoing America, and the other one is set in 80s Australia. It has really charming characters, and I really liked the mystery in this book, although I could guess the outcome of it quite early on, but I just love books set in Australia, so this one was great and absolutely charming and a perfect book for book lovers. I finally read The Seventh Function of Language by Laurent Binet, which was such a witty and amazing book. This story is about Roland Barthes, who gets killed in an accident, so it's a murder mystery. We dive into the investigation with a detective. We meet all the intellectuals of 70s and 80s France, like Foucault for example, but it is also about spies, secret societies, semiotics and the love for language. It was very funny, very interesting and sometimes really bizarre. I can highly recommend this one if you're interested in the topic and interested in semiotics and how language functions, because then you really get a lot out of it. Because there are some jokes in the novel that you can only really detect if you have learned a bit about the characters in this book and the topics they're working on or they're standing for. Another interesting read in September was Brief Notes on the Art and Manner of Arranging One's Books by Georges Perec. This is a short little essay collection that just came out in the Penguin Great Ideas series. And although I really liked all the essays in this collection, I enjoyed the title essay the most. And if you are a book lover and a literature lover, you definitely will get lots of joy out of this little book. And the last book that I read in September was an ebook, and I finished it at 10 o'clock on the 30th of September. It was The Bellwether Revivals by Benjamin Wood. This book is about nursing assistant Oscar, who becomes friends with a group of Cambridge students. One of those students claims to be able to heal ill people with his organ music, but Oscar thinks he can detect some symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder in that boy, and we know right away from the first chapter that the whole story ends in a very big disaster. It was definitely a very interesting idea, and it is also based on real scientific facts and articles, and that made it a very enjoyable read. It is set in the early 2000s, which also had a bit of a nostalgic factor for me in it, and it's a perfect read for the autumn time because it just falls into the category of the secret history and dark academia, and yeah, I really enjoyed it, especially reading it in September. That's it. That's all the books I read in September. Not that many, and not that many great ones. I was a bit disappointed, so I hope October is going to be a bit better for me. I already planned out a few interesting reads that are waiting for me, and I hope I see you soon. Until then, happy reading.